All right, the quiet of the offseason is coming to a close. Combine next week, free agency after that. But we got a couple more days to kind of hang out, hang in, invite some friends back, which is why Brian Barrett of The Ringer is here for the first time in a long time. And we have a gimmick here today that I'm excited about. I do think, though, I'm in repeats from about 6 months ago when I had Chris Mason and Mass Live on. We did the most interesting figures of the upcoming season. And there were guys like, I think Stefon Diggs made the list. And then Drake May was the first overall pick, wasn't even on my board, and then Stretch. And it was just like, oh, happy time. We have the most interesting people of the offseason. I made sure this time, Brian, that I did not omit the starting quarterback of the freaking franchise from my list. But I like gimmicks like this for the sleepers. Do we have sleepers in the holster?
I have one sleeper like completely off the board. I have some guys that maybe people aren't thinking about it, but I have one guy that's completely off the board that maybe people have not even heard of.
Oh, okay. That guy, I don't even know who it is. He's number one atop my board. I've never even heard of him.
Well, I just think there's some guys that every Patriots fan is interested in right now in terms of some of the big names out there, free agency via trade. There's one guy out there that is, I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say some people probably, I know one person definitely has heard of him before. That would be Doug Kyde, if that's any sort of a hint, but nobody else I think has heard of him.
Interesting. So this is like the third string fullback for the University of Washington that you think they're going to take in like the 7th round. Is that
you're onto something minus the position.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, welcome back for those who are new to the Pats Interference Podcast, part of the chipper, charming, charitable CLNS Media Network. I teased at the end of our last episode, or not really the end. It was we did a best of all the player interviews. So I could get into the draft, and let me tell you, I still have a lot of work to do with these prospects. But it's an interesting class. Have you done any draft work?
I mean, I've read a bunch of stuff, and I've looked at the first round and the mock drafts, and I listened to McShay a lot talk about his guys on the Ringer Podcast Network. He had a big long pod after the Senior Bowl, and some of the guys that popped there. I do love the draft, man, and I'm excited for it. So yeah, I've looked like the first round guys. Yeah, I'm very much aware of everybody in the first, not everybody, but Patriots potential targets there in the first round, but have not got into like who the Patriots could potentially take in the later rounds, anything along those lines.
Well, we got time, and you have more work to do outside of that because you need to preview the 5-part Jason Tatum documentary about what it's like to come back from an Achilles injury that everyone's like, I mean, some people on radio are just slinging mud already without having seen more than a trailer. But you got Celtics to juggle, Sox and Bruins and Olympics and everything else. Today, though, as I mentioned last time, it's supposed to be like an off-season primer, and we don't have the exact times yet that Elliott Wolf and Mike Vrabel are expected to speak at the Combine next week. Historically, it's Tuesday and Wednesday. So the next time you listen to this show, we will have stuff from the Combine, and it will be about what Elliott Wolf and Mike Vrabel said. Until then, you're looking at the same positions. I think everyone's kind of covered. Edge defender, small offensive line, receiver, because there's still the Patriots. And then we'll go from there, and plus some free agent rumors, et cetera, et cetera. But today is the zoom out draft piece of this. To set the table, though, for the offseason, because we'll hit on stuff like this here and there. Patriots have 11 draft picks. We know they're picking 31st overall. They've got an extra pick in the 4th round, 3 extras in the 6th. From a free agency standpoint, they've got $36 million in effective cap space. So this is when you meet the top 51 rule, which means that you need to account for 51 players in your roster in the offseason. We know it's 53 in the regular season. But what is that number? And if you don't have 51, you just account for the minimum number of salaries. Say you have 45, 6 guys who make the minimum. You chip that away from your total cap space, plus what you expect your rookies to make based on the draft slot. So anyway, there's the total cap space number, which is raw. And then this is the adjusted, more important one. 36 million is 11th in the league. And I know that sounds like a good number, but let me tell you, Brian, there are good teams ahead and behind them. The Seahawks have more space than them. The Chargers have more space than them. The Rams, the 49ers. If you're feeling generous, the Bengals and Steelers also ahead if you want to call them good teams. Just below, the Broncos, Bucks, Ravens, and Eagles. So the Patriots are in a decent spot. Not a good spot, not a great spot. Not a top cap space where you're going to find the Titans and Raiders and such. But overall for the offseason, that is those are the numbers and the facts to know. Let's get to the people. Because I'm a generous host, you can have the number 1 overall pick in the most interesting people draft of the Patriots 2026 offseason? Who is going first?
So this guy kind of transcends the sport, and that's Stefon Diggs. So it's interesting in a lot of different ways.
Wow.
Well, I mean, he just had a very publicized breakup right around the Super Bowl with Cardi B, it appears. So there's a couple of things here. First of all, we know that he has the legal situation going on as well. And the other element to this is if you asked me a couple of months ago, is Stefon Diggs going to be back on the team? I'd say, why would he not be back on the team? Because he performed at a high level. Everybody seemed to like him. But to what you were saying about the salary cap situation, it's a $26.5 million cap hit next year if you bring him back. And the other component to this is, well, if it's a dead cap number, that goes south of 10. And when you look at him, he was very productive for this team. Obviously went over 1,000 yards. Everybody seemed to love him, his leadership. But if you look at the postseason, he had 2 games where he had south of 20 yards, and he didn't have a game over 50 yards. And I know partially that's because of the offensive line, the offense in general. We all know Drake did not have the best postseason. It was not a great postseason for the offense, as has been well documented. But I think this sort of explains if you don't bring back Diggs, then you got to figure out what you're going to do. So I think it dictates a lot of sort of the elements out there in terms of, all right, does that mean you're drafting a receiver in the first round? Does that mean A.J. Brown, who's been talking with Gronk, he's been talking with Edelman. We know the relationship with Vrabel. If you do that too, you look at A.J. Brown, that's 4 years younger than Stefon Diggs. He's also the bigger athlete. And one of the issues for the Patriots is, can guys get open? Well, if you go back to 2024, he was Pro Football Focus's #1 ranked receiver against man. He had 31 catches against man, 176 yards after the catch against man, was the 3rd best. And so if you're looking at this team and saying, hey, we all know they didn't protect Drake in the postseason. Well, we also know they didn't have dynamic #1 legitimate weapons that you had to account for. And Stefon Diggs was really good for this team. At this point in his career, I don't think he's a guy that you're game planning for the way that even though things went south in Philadelphia with A.J. Brown, you would game plan for A.J. Brown. So I just think the Stefon Diggs decision sort of sets up a lot of what the other stuff they're going to do this particular offseason in terms of what they're trying to do to get that legit #1 option.
It's a great point, and I think that's an overlooked piece of the Stefon Diggs conversation is how did they get there in the first place? I said probably 67 times last offseason. He was not their plan A. He was not their plan B. He was their plan C at best. And so there's an element of, okay, who can we get that's better than Stefon Diggs? And last year, the answer was no one. So that's how they came together, and it worked out, and he had a wonderful 1,000-yard season, first in 6 years in New England. If they survey the landscape of the league in free agency, in the draft, and via trade, like the guys that you mentioned, and supposedly names like Brian Thomas Jr. might be floated in Jacksonville. If they decide Stefon Diggs is still the best option that they can have, he's probably coming back. If they survey the league and go, we can do better than Stefon Diggs, who turns 33 in November, as you mentioned, didn't top 40 yards once in the postseason, and had fewer yards than Romeo Doubs and Jalen Coker did, two guys who played 1 game in the playoffs. Stefon Diggs had 4. Then he's probably not coming back. And the numbers to know with him, you hit on a couple of them. The cap hit is just untenable. I don't think you're going to have this as the Patriots, $26.5 million, especially when most of it is funny money, meaning non-guaranteed. He has 2 years left in his deal. $1.7 million is guaranteed over those 2 years. If he's cut before June 1st, this isn't great, but it's $9.7 million in dead cap. You do free up $16.8 million in space, and that's where you start to vault from 36 in play money to upwards of 50 from the numbers that we were saying off the top. If you apply a post-June 1 designation, which every team gets one, and this is where you release a player, but technically you count it on your books as a guy who's released after June 1. This is all just like accounting, salary cap, who cares? It does change the math here, though. $5.7 million in dead cap. Most teams would go, okay, fine, whatever. $20.8 million then open in space. Now, if you trade him, this kind of splits the difference. $8 million in dead cap, $18.5 million in open cap space if you trade Stefon Diggs. My sense is, without talking to people in the league, which is going to be a lot of time next week at the Combine, there's probably some market for Stefon Diggs, even though this would be his 5th team in, I think, 8 years. But again, what are you doing to replace him? Because in my opinion, Kayshon Boutte and Pop Douglas and Matt Collins and Kyle Williams just running it back with those guys is not good enough. So you could count on a rookie and roll those dice with the 31st overall pick, or I'd rather have someone like an Alec Pearson free agency, who we might get to later, to replace him, because that's the whole thing. What's my best option? How much better can I do? If I can't do better than Stefon Diggs, he's probably coming back.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. The playoffs, and I know there was a lot more that went on, sort of had me soured on Diggs. And we know that he doesn't ordinarily after a few years. I know this is only be year number 2, but say hypothetically you brought in somebody that was better than him. I don't know how that would work in the locker room as well, but I just think the money thing, it's a big question. And I think you got the most out of Diggs. And it felt like, to me, it was sort of an arranged marriage where the Patriots needed more help at the receiver position. Diggs was available, and I don't think Diggs would have come here if he wasn't coming off an injury, because I think there would have been, based on what he was doing in Houston last year, he was having an outstanding season prior to the injury. I think maybe they figure out a way contractually. I know that would have been difficult for Houston to do, but I think some teams that were, obviously the Patriots made the Super Bowl, but before the season, they were not deemed contenders. So I think it was sort of, I say an arranged marriage. It was of convenience. And I think now it's sort of, and this gets into a bigger, broader conversation. The Patriots are so ahead of schedule where you look at the roster, it's like they still need a lot of help, right? They don't really have a ton of blue chip players on this team. And I just wonder if Diggs is obviously not part of the long-term solution. I don't know if he's going to be part of the short-term solution either. And I think that dictates a lot of the offseason is what they decide to do with Diggs.
Yeah, and then the negotiations get into, he'll want some security, I'd imagine, just in terms of total guaranteed cash. Because right now, again, they could cut him or part ways and not really feel much financial penalty to this. And the more I looked over the contract, like when it was first signed and reported and we got all the details, the big talking point was the right one in that, like, oh, this is not really a 3-year, $69 million deal. This is a 1-year contract. Let's feel it out, see how it goes. Went great. There's also a sense of like mutually assured destruction because, again, if he played well, he was never going to settle and shouldn't for the $1.7 million guaranteed. And they wouldn't want to deal with a guy who's going to turn 33 having that sizable cap hit of $26.5 million. So if they do come to the middle, the point about the locker room dynamic is a guy who's in the center of the huddle for the entire team before the Super Bowl and AFC Championship game. You bring in a guy who's better than him and everyone knows it. How does that change? And that's a, personality discussion of that other receiver because he wasn't the best option in Houston when he got traded there, but he knew he had to be on his best behavior because he was in the last year of his deal. Here was a new team coming off of an injury. If you feel comfortable, you act a little bit differently at work. And I don't know what that looks like. Not to mention, as you said, and I'm glad you brought that up, the legal issues that he faces, and we'll see how those resolve because those should not be omitted from conversations as it pertains to Diggs. All right, my turn for a pick. People by now are aware that I'm all in on Max Crosby, and I think that the Patriots should trade him. The thing about this is it's not up to me. It's not up to Elliott Wolf. It's not even up to Mike Vrabel. It's not up to Max Crosby entirely. Though if he wanted to make an NBA-style mess, I would highly encourage it and study from the school of James Harden to see what you can do to get your ass to New England. It's really up to John Spytek, who to me is going to play a big role in this, not only just as the Raiders GM, but as someone taking orders from Tom Brady. And this gets into waters that are like much more talk radio than you'll typically find in this podcast where we've got the hard information and numbers and this and that. But there has to be an element, Brian, from the dude who said, oh, I don't have a dog in the race, who might feel conflicted about seeing his old team succeed without him. Though Tom Brady should feel as secure as any human being has ever felt at work, especially considering he won the breakup by winning a Super Bowl the first year after he left New England, about going, do I really want to send our franchise player to New England in a way that says, or looks like I'm helping them? Or if we do send them, we want the mother load. And right now, when I look at the history of trades, the one parallel that people have brought up, and I think it's mostly fair, is the Khalil Mack trade. And it's not just because the Raiders are involved, but you're looking at an edge player in his prime, et cetera, et cetera. The net of that from Mack going from the Raiders to Chicago, this is now like 8 years ago. Or 8 years? Jesus. I think
it's a long time ago.
Yeah. Was just under 2 first-round picks. There were picks going back and forth. It was just under 2 first-round picks, but Mack was younger. He was the defensive player of the year, and he was a little bit more productive than Max Crosby was last season. So I think this will take the number 31 pick in something else. Is it a 4th rounder? Is it Pop Douglas in a 5th rounder? I don't know. But John Spytek navigating just the whole market for Crosby, the pressure from Brady, and then understanding how he's going to deal with the Patriots is someone that, yeah, we can focus on Elliott Wolf. But like Elliott has made big offers, specifically the Brandon Ayuk deal, and supposedly topped the guarantees that he would have had a year and a half ago to come to New England. And it didn't matter. Like he did everything he could. And I've been critical of Elliott for other stuff, but let's just hone in on that deal. If he does everything he can in the Max Crosby deal and offers the best package, it still might not be enough, depending on the Brady, Spytek, Raiders dynamic.
Yeah, it's fascinating because there's no question about the player. And he's entering his 29-year-old season. So even when we saw that reporting, I think Schefter had it first. They're looking for a Parsons-like return, which would be 2 first-round picks and a player. I guess it was Kenny Clark in the case of what the Cowboys got back in terms of the player.
Which is just posturing. Like, let's be clear about that. That is what do you want me to put out, says Adam Schefter. And they go, oh, well, we want
yes.
a lot.
They're not going to say,
ridiculous.
We'd settle for a first and a fourth, but hey, can you say if we can get 2 firsts, that'd be great. But also Parsons was entering his 26-year-old season and Crosby's entering his 29-year-old season. But with the player, I mean, this would be unbelievable. 3 of the past 4 years, he's been in the top 3 in tackles for loss. The other year, he was 7th. So he's really good against the run, too. He's basically a double-digit sack guy. And the biggest thing that sticks out to me about him is just like the character of the player fits perfectly with Vrabel. This guy, the past 4 years, he's played at least 94% of the snaps. On garbage teams, this guy's busting it out there every game and plays the run. He's not just a situation, not that people think that, but he's not just a pass rusher. He's an elite player against the run as well. The thing that I'm fascinated about with this one is, so you think about the needs this team has, and I know edge is clearly a need, but we've talked so much about receivers. What happened with the offensive line in the postseason? You can always add to a strength, right? Because you go back to how the Patriots defense got really good late in the season and into the playoffs, a lot of blitz heavy stuff, right? And you think about, you have man corners, Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis and Marcus Jones coming out of the slot, right? All those guys, that made it easier for you to be blitz heavy. Well, if you have a guy coming off the edge in Max Crosby and you got the 2 beasts in the middle when we're talking about Milton Williams and you're talking about Christian Barmore, and you add one of the best pass rushers in the entire NFL, as we saw throughout the postseason, even the Seahawks game, it's not like the Seahawks, outside of some Kenneth Walker runs, they weren't having a lot of success moving the football against this team either. You can always just be, hey, maybe we become a legitimate bona fide top 3 defense in the NFL for the entirety of the season. It actually takes some pressure off the offense. Obviously, the offense has to improve based on the postseason performance, but I'm all for adding for a strength. I would, if the price is pick 31 and another draft pick, I'm doing that in a second, because I do think organizationally they're in a weird spot where they went from, all right, let's see what we have this year, even to the trading deadline where it felt like they were sending out players and acquiring draft picks more than, buying at the deadline. But now you're sped up because of your accomplishments, but you're still sort of in the embryonic stages of the roster building process, but you have the quarterback. So you have the quarterback, so you kind of got to go for it now.
And to the point about the pressure, like the ideal world to live in is you can just reliably bank on your front 4 to get pressure and just play whatever coverage you want in the background. It's not to blitz as much as the Patriots did last year. Now, sometimes against certain opponents, that is the best course of action. But just ask the Seahawks, who did blitz in the first quarter of the Super Bowl and then largely hung back, aside from the strip sack, scoop and score, pick 6, whatever it was, in the fourth quarter, officially a fumble return. But the point is, like, they played zone and hung back. If you're able to do that as the Patriots with Max Crosby, and you said Milton Williams and Christian Barmore, and pick another edge, Harold Landry, that's the world you want to live in. The reason they blitz so much, though, is because once Harold Landry lost all of his pass rush basically to a knee injury in mid-October, you're counting on Caleb on Chason and Caleb on Chason alone off of the edge. And he had a really good season, led the team in pressures, had 10 quarterback hits in the postseason, 3 sacks. Nobody else had more than 3 quarterback hits in the playoffs. He might be gone. I think probably will be gone, just understanding the market and the history of that player and the player type and the position. You can't afford to just lose him for nothing. You need a replacement for Caleb on Chason. And in this case, obviously, it would be an improvement in Max Crosby. So, look, they can blitz and be really effective at it. Ideally, though, you just get to spin the dial and sit and wait. behind a 4-man rush, and Max Crosby is who he is. I've talked about him a lot, but he's a huge piece of this. And like whether or not you think it happens, it's something they're seriously considering in New England. So we should hear on the outside. All right. Speaking of going a little more quickly, let's hit a couple here back to back. Who do you have next?
All right, so I'll do my super random one first.
Okay, good.
This one's off the board. So it's a guy by the name of Denzel Boston. He's a receiver for Washington. He's 6'4", so he's a big guy. 11 touchdowns last season. Pro Football Focus ranked him as their 7th overall receiver. And here's the big thing, because I think this is what the Patriots need to be searching for this offseason. I kind of referenced this with A.J. Brown. He had 8 touchdowns against man coverage last year. That was the most in the country. And I was thinking back to those Titans teams that Vrabel had. And look, this is all contingent on they don't get the guy they want in free agency, or they still need to add weapons when they come to the draft, right? Like if they get A.J. Brown, like we were talking about earlier, there's no need for this conversation. But let's say the hypothetical is they don't. The reason I think it's interesting is if you look at the Titans in 2020, A.J. Brown on one side, Corey Davis, who had a really good stretch with Mike Vrabel. Okay, he was 6'3", 209. Boston 6'4", 210. And Davis, if you look at it, when he went to New York, was not the same player. But those 3 years, he's almost like the forgotten part of that Tannehill, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown offense. Davis was really productive for them. He was over 900 yards in 2020. So just a guy, and based on sort of the quarterback in terms of he wants to throw it up, he wants to give guys chances. How many times did we see him this season? And I know everybody gets scarred by the postseason. How many times is Booty just running down the field and the ball lands literally in Booty's hands? Just the perfect placement on the football. And if you have a guy, and I understand he'd be a rookie, he'd have his challenges and all that, but just a bigger bodied receiver, because if you look at this Patriots team, I know Matt Collins obviously has good size, but even Booty on the outside, it's not like he's a big guy. What is he, 6'1"? I think they could use some size. I mean, you think back to last year, and I do think Kyle Williams, I think he has a lot of potential as a guy that can beat man coverage just because of his overall speed, but a guy that can do it with size. I think if the Patriots are still looking for a weapon, you got to keep adding to that group, take more bites at the apple. This is a guy that's projected to go anywhere from like 20 to 28, 29. So maybe you'd have to move up, send around a mid-round pick or whatever. But it would be interesting to me if that's the type of player they target based on the history of Vrabel.
Yeah, and that's the type of leap you mentioned, going from 31 up a few spots. Their extra 4th, one of their extra 6, all 3 of their extra 6. That amount of capital could get it done. It's not going to be a huge spot. Like you're not going to 20th or 22nd or 23rd. Boston, I like on the surface. Watched a little bit of him this week. Don't have a ton more than that, but a good name to know, especially to file away at 31. Okay, I have from a super sleeper to probably the most obvious name still left on the board, Christian Gonzalez. How quickly does this extension get done? Because I have to think this is a foregone conclusion that it does get done. And there is a waiting game in a game of chicken here between his agents and the Patriots and Devin Witherspoon and his agents and the Seattle Seahawks. Both of these guys are 2023 first-round picks. They're newly eligible for extensions, and both of them saw first Derek Stingley and then Sauce Gardner reset the cornerback market as other first-round picks who were newly eligible last offseason. So it depends, A, on who wants to jump in first, because then the second player and their agency and their representative just go, okay, I'll take that, but +1, because this is exactly what Sauce Gardner did. And if you do go first, it's a matter of how high can you get the other team to jump. Now, do you want them to jump in terms of total value, which was Sauce Gardner, $120 million last year, actually 0.1. Average annual value was just over $30 billion, because exactly on the dot was $30 million Derek Stingley, who signed first. But Stingley, even after he signed in March and Sauce Gardner got his deal last summer, still holds the record for total guarantees in a contract. So what's important to Christian Gonzalez? Where are the Patriots willing to extend themselves? Total money, guaranteed money, because they're going to want to lock in Christian Gonzalez for probably a 4-year deal. And at the expense of that commitment, which is a player you want shorter term deals, higher guarantees with each contract, and you just stack them up and stack them up, stack them up. He might say, okay, I'll give you the extra year, but you have to up the guarantees well beyond the 89 that Stingley got. Where do they land there on the middle? And the timing of this is going to be really interesting, because worst case scenario, Brian, again, I just have to think this gets done, but it could linger into the summer. And if people thought last year with the hamstring injury was annoying, just imagine a healthy guy who gets asked by people like me every day at camp or every week when we see him, are you any closer? What do you want? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't think anyone wants to deal with that. So ideally, Christian Gonzalez, who still is only 23, one of the best corners in the world, gets paid like it. It gets done quickly. And if you're the Patriots, it's before Devin Witherspoon. Again, one of the best corners in the league who's up for an extension.
Well, and I think Witherspoon just split streak again, as you were talking there. But it's very interesting to me with Gonzalez because so the corner, you referenced a bunch of them, but couldn't these teams too, if you're Seattle, if you're the Patriots, be like, well, Surtain was the defensive player of the year and his deal was a clean 4 for 96. So there is some negotiation there, but then you can look at it from Gonzalez's perspective and be like, well, I'm better than Sauce Gardner right now, so I should get more money than Sauce Gardner. So I don't think it's that easy. But the point that you made is the point that I'm the most interested in. Is I think you have to think about this from a Patriots perspective, even if, and I wouldn't even say an overpay, but even if you have to give into the demands a little bit from Gonzalez's side of things, he is so important to the defense, and he'd be what, your first guy that you've signed a first round pick since Dante Hightower. He's going to be on the team. Conservatively, he's one of the 8 best corners in the league, even if you don't think he's one of the best 4.
Oh, yeah. And he's not 8. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. He played like he was unbelievable in the Super Bowl, had an unbelievable game. We know how valuable he was to that defensive scheme. So the thing with me is you think back even to arguably the greatest corner in the past 15, 20 years. Darrelle Revis has that holdout with the Jets. And remember, he wasn't the same guy when he came back from the holdout. He ended up dealing with an injury. Not to say that he wasn't still a great player, but Gonzalez, we've already seen, to your point, him missing games. The first game the Patriots lost this season with Gonzalez and with Milton Williams on the field together was the Super Bowl. Like, that's the first, and I'm not saying they're going to go undefeated next year, but the point being, he's such an important player. I don't want this to linger because I also think it sets a precedent for the franchise as well. I don't think like any Drake negotiation is going to be hard to do in the coming years, but this is one that I would just much rather them get this done early. And if I was the Patriots, to what you were saying about Gonzalez, I'd want to be the team that goes first. I'd like to get the player signed before the Seahawks do, because maybe that causes more pressure on the Seattle side of things. But Gonzalez can easily argue if Witherspoon gets more than Gardner, I need more than Witherspoon. That's why I think if I'm the Patriots, I want to go first. But I know Gonzalez is represented, I believe, by CAA. They're probably going to want to say, hey, let's sit back and see how this thing goes. I just hope it ends quickly, but I don't have much optimism there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when Derek Stingley got that deal, and look, this was a very, I don't want to say player friendly because that suggests like he didn't deserve it. He absolutely did, but it was 3 years, $90 million, $89 million guaranteed. You do not see that high guarantee, and especially for a player at that position, which corners, like, look, we all understand are premium positions, important. You go corner, pass rusher, receiver, left tackle, corner in some sort of order, but those are the top 5. They fluctuate more year to year in terms of performance because it's just a low volume position where a contested catch here turns into an interception there. The whole view of that season, fair or not, changes in the way that you look at it and judge it, and then consequently pay that player for that production. Now, that deal was signed earlier, much earlier than Sauce Gardner's. And Nick Caserio has kind of been ahead in a way, doing business differently than he had done in New England with deals like that you look and go, wow, they just kind of gave the agent whatever he wanted. That Stingley deal looks better and better as more time goes on. And yeah, you gave him more guarantees. And yeah, it was probably a year shorter than you wanted, especially compared to the Sauce Gardner deal. You got him under contract. He's paid less than Gardner is. He'll soon be paid less than Gonzalez and Witherspoon. So to your point, even if this comes out and like, wow, what a deal for Christian Gonzalez, who got like 115 million guaranteed, 4 years, whatever. Fine. Like, this will age well. He's 23 years old. You want this guy still going into his prime to be a New England Patriot, whatever it takes, make it happen. But to your point, though, about like get this done early in mind as well. The agents know this. So they say, okay, well, this isn't going to be a $31 million a year. It's going to be 40. And you're like, come on. But this is the whole process of negotiation. They understand the leverage that they have, and they're going to use it because he's I forget top corners. Where would you put him in top players in the league?
Top 25? I mean, considering the position, I mean, you look at the teams that made the runs to the even if you look at the Patriots, right? They
I think
played
that's right.
Surtain in the AFC Championship. They played Stingley in the second round, and obviously they're known for their guys up front. But Stingley, one of the best corners, as we said, in the NFL. And then you look on the flip side, we're talking about Witherspoon also getting a contract. I just think that player is so important because we see all these receivers get these huge contracts in the NFL. If you have a guy that can just defend the other team's best player, it's just massive for everything else you could do defensively. So I would say top 25. I mean, if I'm thinking about it off the top of my head, I mean, obviously you value like the elite pass rushers at a high level. And I think it would be pass rushers and corners, right, on the defensive side. And then the offensive side, it's like obviously a lot of quarterbacks have more value than him. And then certain receivers, right? But it's like, how many receivers would you take before you get to the elite corners? Like, obviously you take JSN, you take Puka, you'd probably take Chase, but how long is that list? You know what I mean? Because of what the elite corner can do for you on the other side of things. So I think it's that I mean, that would be an interesting debate, how many receivers you take before say, like, if you say Surtain's the best corner right now, how many guys would you take before him? Would it be 4 receivers? Would it be 5? I mean,
I think it's
I
in
don't
that
know.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because
around,
it's harder and harder to have the top corners shadow receivers. And it's not
right.
just motion. It's not just putting
Scheming,
them in
yeah.
the slot. It's just all the communication and the cheat motions and the timing of just the all of the things I just listed put together at once that forces stress upon a defenses that are just like, F it. Like we're not doing what you saw with Stephon Gilmore in 2018 and Darrelle Revis years before then. It's just too hard. All right, we got 3 more picks. You have 2 of them. Who's your next one? Okay, so I know we're all grieving. For you, because the Patriots season is over, or maybe that they lost the Super Bowl. For me, it's that I'm not going to have football until September. And I do like free agency in the draft just like everybody else, but I will tell you there's nothing like the rush of Sundays. And for folks who have been listening to this podcast, you know there's nothing like the rush of Sundays, along with a winning PrizePicks lineup, because all season, we handed out winning picks at PrizePicks. And if you're a little late to the game, that's okay, because PrizePicks still rolls on as the #1 place to win money while you watch sports well beyond football, basketball, hockey, baseball around the corner. Go Sox. If you would like to join in now, it is still the perfect time, because if you use our promo code CLNS, you will get $50, 50, in lineups once you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. How does that work? Glad you asked. At PrizePicks, this is as simple as it gets anywhere. You look at their board of players when you download the PrizePicks app, and they could have points, they could have rebounds, they could have assists, they could have runs, they could have runs allowed, hits. I don't care. You get to make the picks of the player and the stat, and then all you go is more than or less than with that night or day's game. You put it in your lineup, the player, the stat, more than, less than. You pick another player, more than, less than, and sometimes they give you a discount. Very like predictable, easy things, more or less than. I don't know, a half a passing yard, which we did a lot of this season. Anyway, you lock in between 2 to 6 players on PrizePicks. Boom. There's a lineup. You put down $5. They give you 50 in lineups to play with. And look, let's say you're more adventurous than me. You like to do a lineup of 4 players. In your first 3 hit, and you're watching number 4 late at night, maybe with a newborn, just like me going, please, please, please hit. You don't have to wait. You don't have to say please. You have early payouts now at PrizePicks that let you withdraw and take your money at the best place to win money while you watch sports. So why wait? Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right.
Okay, so this is another interesting name where I think if you don't get a top tier weapon, and maybe you still bring Diggs back, but if you don't get that AJ Brown trade we were talking about, if you don't draft a receiver in the first round, Kyle Pitts, and I know Atlanta sort of has the rights there to see what they do. But all right, so I know Kyle Pitts has been this underachiever, but let me present the Kyle Pitts case. Obviously, it's going to be a lot cheaper than an elite level receiver, probably somewhere like 14 mil, 15, 16 million per season. I know we're saying 14 million, he's cheap, but in NFL terms, okay? So last season, you realize he was second among tight ends in yards with 928. My theme, Callahan, he had the most yards against man coverage among tight ends. Hooper was really a non-factor for this team for large stretches this year. I do really like Henry, but obviously not the athlete that Pitts is. And if you look at Pitts' career, it's very interesting / underachieving, but I think you can explain it. So his rookie season, he went over 1,000 yards. His quarterback was Matt Ryan, even an older Matt Ryan. Last season, he had Penix, who wasn't good, unless some Falcons fans want to argue he was, and Cousins, who couldn't move and his arm was never good, and it's not good at this particular point in time. In between that, here were his quarterbacks: Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, not to mention 2 different coaching staffs. He's almost 6'6". He's a guy that I know this a couple of years ago now, but I don't think he's losing his athleticism. He did run a 4.44. That's in the 98th percentile. We are looking for bigger players that can get open, that Drake will throw the ball to. I just feel like, hey, if they're in a position where they're not adding that number 1 receiver, this may be a worthy gamble considering the athleticism of the player. I know he's not like the perfect Vrabel fit because they like their guys to do so many different things, but it's tough for me to give up on a guy with that type of sort of athletic resume, even if some of his time in Atlanta was disappointing. And I do attribute a lot of that to the coaching staff. I mean, I know this is me like defending the player that I'd like the Patriots to be interested in, but I do think like they were poorly coached there. And like, how is that team not in the playoffs any of the past few years based on the roster that they had? There's so much talent. You can't get the quarterback position right. Like, come on.
Yeah, I didn't have Kyle Pitts within the same neighborhood, the same state, within like cell service of my board. So there's a process here of me listening and thinking about how he would fit, and then you go back. Like, I mean, the easiest thing would be kind of the old Hernandez tape, and we don't have to do for the 5th time of like the Boston TE party or 2 tight end offense, et cetera, because he's really not a true tight end. He is someone that I know the fantasy community would tell you it's just agonizing the way he was underutilized by Arthur Smith in Atlanta. His effort, though, to me is going to be a huge obstacle for a Vrabel coach team. Like some of the blocks in that game that he threw deserve to be in quotes, smaller fonts, like maybe even just described as something other than a block. So I don't see it. But I think what that speaks to is a need for more athleticism at your second tight end position, and maybe the long-term replacement for Henry, who is now going into the last year of his contract. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think you have to start looking at that because obviously Hooper he's done, right? He's not coming back. I mean, it would be shocking if they not shocking, but you
wouldn't be counting on him for anything.
Yeah, he's not a productive player, and you still got to fill in the long-term. Like, I love Hunter Henry as a player. He was also not very effective I know he had the touchdown pass, a touchdown grab against the Chargers, but he was also not very productive. I know when I had you on my pod, I tried to talk into myself that he's a top 5 tight end. It was a terrible take by me. Clearly wasn't that. He was producing at a high level, but he wasn't that. That's another position long-term that I think the Patriots have to at least acknowledges a need. And look, maybe they look at that in the draft as well. They could certainly do that. But I just think he's they say it in the NBA, like a second draft guy, where a high lottery pick doesn't work out the first time. And it's not like he hasn't been productive. Like I said, he's had 1,000 yards and he's had over 900 yards, maybe playing for somebody like Vrabel in a system with McDaniels and a quarterback that he knows at the very least is reliable, is going to throw him the football. Maybe you get the best out of the player.
Yeah. Yeah, the draft, I think they are absolutely going to invest. I want to say a day 2 pick. Yeah, F it. You know what? It's February. A day 2 pick and tight end. Lock me down. Put it in Sharpie. There you go. I'm also going to be on paternity leave for a lot of the draft season, so you won't be able to find me or hear me. This is my last pick, and I'm going to break the rules and just give you 2 names. So I want you to pick one, and then I will go on about them. And I said at the top, I'm not going to omit, like I did in this draft from 6 months ago going into the season, Drake May, who is number 1 on Chris Mason's board for most interesting people, and we talked about it. Drake May is one, Robert Kraft is the other, which now 30 whatever minutes in this podcast, I should tell you, Elliott Wolf and Mike Vrabel are off the table. So if you're going, Callahan, how did you omit the 2 guys in charge of the whole freaking offseason? Those were the rules. Brian knew them. You didn't. Drake May or Robert Kraft? Pick one.
I like to hear the Robert Kraft thing.
Okay. So Robert Kraft, we always hear from at the owners' meetings, and it's about the 10, 15-minute, sometimes a little bit longer. I don't want to call it a press conference. Don't want to call it a scrum. It's not that intense, but there's just kind of a gathering, and there are cameras, and he speaks, and he's optimistic. And there's always 1 or 2 things that he says that we cling to then, not just that day, but for months on end. And sometimes it's calling Calvin Ridley's wife Calvin Ridley's girlfriend. Sometimes it's misplaced optimism about the season and the roster and the understanding that a guy like Gerard Mayo, who had only been coaching for 5 years, will not just start sprinting with the job and run into success. And I'm curious about Robert's, I want to say approach, feelings towards this offseason, where this has been an organization that understands playing the long game, gives you the biggest window to contend, meaning sustainable contention through the draft, something also he's talked about year after year after year. And yet, for someone who I just will say, I don't think we're going to hear from for many years at the owners' meetings. I think Jonathan might start to take up more of the public appearances for this ownership group. Does he want to hit the gas a little bit? Does he want to spend more the year after they set some records in free agency as they did last year with the cap space that we talked about and not sit on it and roll it over to next year and kind of target for middle tier free agents? Does he say, let's spend more? I understand that the draft and develop model that Elliott Wolf brought from Green Bay that we've been using here in New England is what sustains success. We just got to the Super Bowl. I want to go back. I want to go back next year and the year after that. Let's make this work. We're already there. Because for someone whose expectations have always been probably a level higher than maybe they should have been, at least certainly in the post-Tom Brady era, and the expectations right now are contention. The only step above that is like Super Bowl or bust. Does he take that approach, that belief, that pressure? Because they're involved ownership is more than people think and more than people know. But that would be new even for the Crafts, I think. Maybe not like a 2011 Red Sox of like, we need to sign Carl Crawford and everyone else who's a free agent because we need to boost the ratings at Nesson. Like ratings are fine in New England and the team is worth plenty. But I'm curious what he says in March. And I'm curious the tenor and the tone for someone who has to know that he's, you know, kind of at the end of what you always enjoy as an owner, being like the front facing person, the leader of the organization.
Yeah, or Sandoval a couple of years later where he popped his belt when he was swinging. Dude was a little loose in the cage there after getting that money from the Red Sox. But to your point, it's interesting on a couple of levels. First of all, obviously, his age. He probably thought, hey, this could be one of my last chances to get – not that he's actually thinking this, but it's like, hey, man, like in the Super Bowl again. We were right there. We were 1 win away, and they were far away in that game, but we're 1 win away from winning a championship, and he knows what he has with the coach and he knows what he has with the quarterback. But the thing that gives me some hesitancy with that Robert Kraft will actually say, hey, let's go for it. Let's go, to your point, go from contention all the way in. Like, we're all the way in with this thing. I just think about recent comments he made. He just talked about the Gerard Mayo firing as one of the most expensive mistakes he made. I forget the direct quote, but he was talking about how much money it cost him paying off the coaching staff, the previous coaching staff, with getting rid of Gerard Mayo in 1 year.
As if people cared about that. Yeah, like, oh, I'm so sorry, Robert, that you had to do what owners do, which is bring in new coaches and pay them and then pay the old guys off because you agreed to a contract because that's how contracts work. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Robert, sorry you hired a guy that wasn't qualified, and now you have a guy that is extremely qualified, and he's got your team in the Super Bowl. So sorry you had to deal with that, man. I have a lot of empathy for what you were going through there.
Well, let me reframe it quickly because, you know, the idea of all in is not to say like it's all about 2026. Like even if in this case I'm right and there is a sense of kind of hitting the gas a little bit, it's not going to be, you know, next year is the only year. It's like there's no tomorrow. But it would be cases of 50-50 or 40-60, or do we really want to give up this for Max Crosby? Yes, go do it. You know, things like that. Do you want to trade up? Yes, go ahead. Do you want to give Romeo Doubs an extra $5 million? Yes, go do it. You know?
Yeah. And I think that in some sense, you would hope that he wants to do that, because when you look at this organization, you think about the teams that usually spend the most money in free agency. The first year, they usually get a bump. And then the second year, they come back down to earth. Actually, we can look at the 2021 Patriots when they went out and they spent all that money in free agency. They had a bump that year. Obviously, part of that was the quarterback as a rookie played well in Mac Jones. You go to the playoffs the following season, and I'm not saying it's all because of the free agency period. Some of those guys hit. Hunter Henry hit. Jonnu Smith didn't hit, right? Obviously, you had a guy like Judon hit, but other guys didn't hit. And then you think about the next year, obviously, you made the transition to giving Matt Patricia the play calling duties on offense. That's part of the equation as well. But look at Washington, where they spent a bunch of money in free agency the previous season. They brought in a ton of veteran guys, right? Older players in the case of Bobby Wagner. Now, partially it's because their quarterback was dealing with injuries the whole season, and they had some issues with the coaching staff clearly, but they fell off. So ordinarily, you don't see that type of team get to the level the Patriots did, where it's one step further than Washington. And you're trying to say, well, how do we do two things where we build around our young core, but also let's add to what we have right now because we were that close to winning the Super Bowl a season ago. I think it's an interesting dynamic because even like we talk about the Crosby trade, kind of dictates the direction of the organization if you're giving up multiple draft picks, where the Patriots clearly still need to hit on draft picks younger players because it's still not a great – there's some great young players like we talked about the Gonzalez contract, but it's not like the Patriots are loaded with young talent.
No. Yeah, it'll be interesting. And it will be hard to know and parse out, like, unless there's real reporting or the Crafts leaked this and want it known that they were behind the Max Crosby trade or this and that. Like, we'll see. And even then, you need to listen through a certain lens to understand, again, how much of that is true versus, just something they would have done anyway that they want to take credit for, which, again, you're bankrolling the operation. You're the owner. You get credit, but you also get criticism for your biggest moves and biggest swings when they connect and when they don't. But no one is crying for having to fire and pay out people that you agreed to pay in the first place. That's just not how that works. Okay. Last pick, and then we got to go.
My last pick is just, and maybe this is kind of an obvious one. It's Will Campbell. Just because obviously he struggled mightily in the Super Bowl, even though the pressure numbers by Next Gen were just slightly exaggerated. That was a little crazy. But for the most part, before you got to the playoffs, he had a really good rookie year. And he came back and he battled through the knee injury. And obviously, that's a lot to do coming back from the knee injury that season. But clearly, he had his struggles. So I'm just interested sort of in how the offseason works for him, right? You always see this in Major League Baseball. The guys get to spring training. Oh, he's in the best shape of his life, right? We see it in the NBA. Like, are we going to get this type of thing with Will Campbell? What specifically is he working on? Because I'm not an offensive line guru enough to say, okay, was it guys with speed? Yeah, he had some trouble with guys with speed, but also at times, like, he did get bull rushed. Is it the arm length? Like, we talked about that before the draft. I think the Patriots, like, the reaction after the Super Bowl about replacing him at left tackle, I'm like, they just spent the 4th pick on him. They're not replacing him at left tackle. He was the 4th overall selection. So I'm just interested to hear, like, the stories about what he's working on. Is he trying to put on more muscle? Is he trying to work on his speed? Whatever it is, I just feel like that's going to be a huge talking point because I feel like we went from, there was like 3 cycles with Will Campbell, or maybe even 4. The first one was everybody before the draft questioning some of the stuff in terms of wingspan, arm length. Then we got to the quotes after the draft where I die for Drake May. And he comes out and he has a really good rookie season. I know the first game against the Raiders had the full start, but he had a really good rookie season. Everybody sort of loves him and he's buddies with Drake. He's at the Celtics game with Drake. And then he has this great rookie season, as I said. And then you have the playoffs and he didn't perform well. And it did feel like in some sense, the fan base kind of turned on him to the point where it's like, hey, are we sure that this guy's the left tackle of the future? Going back to the questions that we had prior to the draft. So I just think he's a fascinating character entering next year because I can look at it and say, well, like his bad games were against elite defenses. Okay, but if you want to get to eventually back to that area again, you are going to have to do it against elite defenses and an elite pass rusher. So ordinarily, the 4th overall pick is not playing in the AFC Championship, in the Super Bowl, and against the Texans, who arguably had the best defense throughout that whole run. You're usually not going up against the Texans, the Broncos, and the Seahawks caliber defenses in back-to-back weeks. Like it usually doesn't happen that way. So I do feel like he didn't really have the ability to grow within the position throughout the season.
I'm glad we're ending on Will Campbell. I agree with you. This is one where it will be harder to track the changes, the development, everything that's not self-reported by him, which, again, talk about listening through things through a certain lens and some scrutiny. I don't think he'll be one to hype up his own improvements or what he's doing, but the point is well taken because they need a year or 2 leap out of Will Campbell. Like, that is just point blank the truth. If we are having the same positional conversations midway through next year, it's probably time to move him to guard. And let me say this, because I've gotten criticism for being too soft on the offensive line. couple of things can all be true at the same time. Number one, he did not allow 14 pressures as Next Gen Stats posted right after the Super Bowl, which set a certain narrative. 14 is an insane number. You will find other people who watch tape who will tell you the exact same thing. Just let go of that number. Number two, he still sucked in the Super Bowl. That is true. Number three, the last thing we saw is not the only thing that matters. Because if that was true, Drake May, who also sucked, okay, we don't have concerns about, because you remember more than the last thing that we saw. And this also goes for Drake's playoffs, to be frank. Okay, you saw what was a largely great regular season, MVP runner-up from Drake May. Will Campbell's regular season? Sure, it was against lesser competition. And you got questions when he's getting beat badly by Will Anderson and Myles Garrett, et cetera, as a 21, then 22-year-old left tackle. But his regular season was largely good. It really was. Exceeded expectations, especially on the scale of how do rookie offensive tackles do, even first-round picks. They're abominations. They're disastrous. He was disastrous in the Super Bowl. We understand that. We saw it. I'm telling you that. If you cannot take that into your brain and store it, is the fact that I've said that out loud, that's not on me. I've said it now 3 or 4 times. But the fact of the matter is, on balance, on the season, he was better than expected. And this idea of position change is just ridiculous. If you want to tell me he still might be better at guard than tackle, sure, but that's a different conversation than what we're having right now. So that's where I want to leave that. Okay, what do you got coming up?
I got a pod coming out this afternoon as we're recording on Thursday. So sometime Thursday, Connor Ryan from the Globe on the Olympics and the Bruins getting ready for the second half of the season, or I guess the post break, because it's not really the second half. And this guy, Andrew Callahan, is going to come on and do a home and home with me. So
that bum.
Yeah, he's going to come on with me. So if you've heard of him and you appreciate this content, then you're going to like my content today as well.
I told you before we started recording, you were like, yeah, just like have 4 predictions for the offseason. It's like, wow, that's a great idea. Predictions. People love predictions. I haven't done them on this pod in forever. Maybe I should soon. So I do have 4 predictions for you. I feel good about 3.5 of them.
Okay.
I want to go bold. You want to be a guest. You want to be, bold,
yeah,
memorable. You want to bring your best on someone else's home turf. You want to be a good guest.
You think Skip Bayless' prediction is going to work out? He wants 3-on-3 in the NHL now in overtime.
Is he's still talking?
Yeah. Well, did you see he got, what's the thing on X/Twitter now where community notes? Is that what it's called?
Oh, yeah. You get corrected
you say something
by
that's wrong.
1 million people.
So Skip tweeted after the U.S. game, hope the NHL is paying attention to this 3-on-3 overtime. It's like, dude, they've been doing that for like a decade.
It is funny. Look, not a hockey person. Both hands up. But having other people online discover hockey, and there was once a viral tweet, absolutely hysterical. There was a black guy who tweeted like, "How long have white people been hiding hockey from us? This shit is lit." It's just like this. I mean, it was during the playoffs, obviously, when everyone just like me turns into overtime hockey. And as the John Boyce tweet is like, "Why watch overtime hockey when you can simply do cocaine and ride a motorcycle out of a helicopter?" Because there's just nothing like it. Anyway, enough motorcycles, cocaine, and playoff hockey. Olympic hockey, though, I'm locked in. And you have a Sox hockey jersey on right now for the folks.
I do. 47 brand Sox jersey. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I don't know.
47 brand. They do good work.
I got a Celtics one too.
I have to go give you some predictions. We got to go. Always a pleasure, my friend. And we'll have you on before the draft at some point. All right.
All right, Callan. Thank you.